What if everything you thought you knew about ultimate justice, divine love, and what happens after this life? What if it was just one small piece of a much bigger, maybe even more hopeful puzzle?
Hmm.
We're talking about concepts that stir up some really deep emotions.
Yeah,
Fundamental questions about fairness, mercy, and just the very nature of existence itself.
absolutely. These are the big questions, the ones that touch our deepest fears and also our most profound hopes.
Yeah, challenging us to think about what it really means to be judged, and maybe even more importantly, what it means to be loved.
That's right. And today we're embarking on a deep dive into a really fascinating collection of sources. We've
Hmm.
got ancient scriptures, mystical writings, modern philosophical dialogues, even psychological insights.
What a range.
It is. And our mission here isn't really to land on one single definitive answer. It's more about exploring the rich spectrum of human understanding about what might come next. The role of divine love, the different ways people have interpreted judgment, spiritual consequence.
So uncovering how different traditions, different thinkers grapple with these huge questions.
Exactly. And inviting you, our listener, to maybe re-examine your own assumptions, perhaps broaden your perspective on these timeless mysteries.
Okay, all right, let's truly explore this landscape together then. We'll probably start by looking at some of the more traditional views, right? The ones that often talk about um, definitive punishments, clear lines of accountability, especially after death.
Yeah, those are foundational for many people.
Then we can shift gears and contrast those with some powerful assertions of, well, unconditional love, universal salvation even, perspectives that offer a much more expansive, maybe hopeful vision of how the divine interacts with us.
That contrast is really key to understanding the breadth of thought here.
And we'll also get into concepts like purification, the idea of self-inflicted suffering, which is fascinating, and the transformative power of spiritual growth that maybe goes beyond just simple reward and punishment.
Right, moving beyond a simple carrot and stick model.
Exactly. So this isn't about finding one easy answer, like you said, but really appreciating the incredible diversity, the depth of human thought on these questions that just don't seem to go away.
It's quite striking, actually, when you look at some traditions, how explicitly they articulate severe consequences for, say, unbelief or wickedness. They paint a very vivid picture of divine accountability.
Look at how specific.
Well, take the Quran, for example. It speaks directly and repeatedly of painful torment and humiliating torment. This isn't vague stuff. It's directed at unbelievers and also those who actively contradict God and his messenger.
So very clear lines drawn.
Very clear. And the text emphasizes God's omniscience, the idea that all deeds are meticulously recorded and that individuals will be informed of every single action on the day of resurrection.
Wow, a complete accounting.
Exactly. It underscores a clear, comprehensive system of divine justice and accountability. Actions in this life have very tangible, often severe, repercussions in the afterlife, according to this view. The divine is presented as, well, a meticulous record keeper and an ultimate, uncompromising judge.
A force ensuring every deed meets its just deserts.
Precisely. Good or ill.
That's a powerful and pretty direct articulation of judgment. Leaves very little room for ambiguity, doesn't it?
It really doesn't.
But what's really interesting is how this concept of hell, or maybe just profound suffering, isn't just confined to religious texts talking about a literal spiritual place.
Right, it takes other forms too.
Yeah, like James Baldwin in The Fire Next Time. Such a searing social critique, he offers this deeply resonant perspective on it.
How so?
Well, he notes how the sentiment, sinners shall be bound in hell 1,000 years. That phrase carried an emotional tone that was just profoundly familiar to him from his own experience.
Familiar in what way?
He explicitly connects the idea of a white man's heaven with a black man's hell. For Baldwin, the devils weren't just supernatural beings.
They're real people.
Exactly. They became tangible reality in the form of oppressors, those who inflict profound, often merciless suffering. He writes about the merciless formulation and the candor of its hatred being as familiar as his own skin.
That's incredibly powerful language.
It really is. And it forces us to ask, is hell purely a spiritual destination? Or can it manifest as a harrowing social construct?
Or both.
Or both. Baldwin's perspective strongly suggests that for many, the hell they experience is very much an earthly reality, a condition inflicted by human actions, by systemic injustices, not just some future divine decree.
That really broadens the discussion, doesn't it? Moving beyond just the theological to the social, the lived experience.
It definitely makes you consider the multiple layers of suffering and judgment.
Okay, so shifting back maybe to a more spiritual exploration, but one that's equally profound in its own way. We have C.S. Lewis in his allegorical novel, The Great Divorce.
Ah, yes, the bus trip.
Exactly, the bus trip. He presents this really nuanced, thought-provoking view of the afterlife. He suggests that individuals, in a very real sense, choose their eternal state.
How did that work in the story?
Well, the narrative describes this bus journey from a gray town, which seems to represent a kind of self-chosen purgatory or hell, to a real place, symbolizing heaven.
And the people on the bus?
The inhabitants of this gray town, even though they're in this perpetual state of discomfort, dissatisfaction, they cling stubbornly to their unappeasable lusts, their ingrained preferences, even when it brings them pain.
Like scratching an itch, even if it makes it worse.
Precisely. He uses that exact kind of imagery. He talks about a sensualist who would rather itch than not. It implies that hell isn't necessarily some arbitrary punishment imposed by an angry god, but maybe a continuation, an intensification even, of self-willed separation from joy, from truth, from what's actually real. It's a consequence of choices made and clung to.
Even if those choices are ultimately destructive.
Right. Rooted in this deep internal resistance to change, to joy. It's a fascinating psychological insight wrapped in allegory.
Lewis really does make you consider the profound power of our own will, even when it leads to self-destruction. He expands on this too, doesn't he?
He does.
Talking about how even seemingly, well, undignified vices, like he calls mere sensuality, can lead to being eternally lost.
But crucially, not because God forces it.
Right, not forced, but because the fleeting pleasure of these things diminishes over time, while the craving for them just intensifies.
Leaving you in this desolate state.
Yeah, where one would literally fight to the death to keep that very emptiness, that hollow craving, rather than let it go for something unknown but potentially fulfilling.
Yeah.
It's quite a picture.
He paints it starkly. The distorted, faded faces of the bus passengers, fixed in their impossibilities, he says. It's just a profound inward choice that then manifests outwardly in their very being.
So the core insight seems to be that hell, in Lewis's portrayal here at least, isn't primarily an external punishment.
But a gradual, self-inflicted spiritual atrophy.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? Are we maybe inadvertently building our own spiritual prisons? Clinging to what's familiar, even if it offers less and less, just because the unknown of real joy feels too risky.
It definitely challenges us to look inward at our own attachments, the subtle ways we might be choosing our own forms of suffering.
That's a powerful way to frame Lewis's unique contribution here.
And just to connect this to the broader theological picture, Lewis also talks elsewhere in Mere Christianity about God saving man from the disapproval of God, which sounds quite traditional at first glance. But he elaborates. He explains that we are made by him, but we can be begotten by God, meaning we can come to share in the life of Christ through what he kind of poetically calls a good infection.
A good infection, interesting phrase.
Isn't it? It outlines this clear path to unity with God, a process that requires an active embrace of Christ's life and teachings.
So while the Great Divorce emphasizes how people might choose separation through stubbornness,
Mere Christianity implies that deviating from this path of actively embracing Christ's life, well, it has consequences.
but the nature of those consequences, is it eternal torment like some traditions teach, or is it more like that self-chosen separation from the Great Divorce?
That's where Lewis is perhaps less definitive across his works. You see a development in his thought, maybe, but it provides this theological framework where both human choice and divine invitation are absolutely central to our ultimate destiny.
And then Lewis takes another turn, a really fascinating, almost chilling one, in the Screwtape Letters.
Ah, yes, a very different perspective.
Totally different. It's brilliantly satirical, but also profoundly unsettling. A view of human temptation and damnation, but all from the perspective of a senior demon, Screwtape.
Writing letters to his nephew, Wormwood.
Exactly. And Screwtape speaks of the anguish and bewilderment of a human soul as a wine which is the reward of all our labors.
Chilling is the right word.
It highlights not just our own feelings, but this idea of a malevolent active force working tirelessly to undermine faith, twist virtues into vices, and stop spiritual growth.
An external adversary.
Yes. Screwtape actually gloats about souls being secured for eternal despair and horror, not primarily by God's decree, but through their cunning manipulation. It paints this vivid picture of spiritual warfare for the human soul.
Reinforcing a kind of dualistic understanding, good versus evil for our souls.
Pretty much. Where souls can indeed be permanently lost, not just through their own self-will, but by falling prey to these malevolent forces. It adds a whole other dimension to the consequences of our choices, suggesting there are active external pressures vying for our spiritual direction.
Okay, so now, in really stark contrast to those views of direct judgment and eternal punishment, some sources articulate a profoundly unconditional, almost radically non-punishing view of the divine.
A completely different perspective.
Completely. It fundamentally redefines the relationship between humanity and God. Conversations with God is a prime example here.
What does it say?
It states, pretty unequivocally, God will not condemn us no matter what we choose.
Wow. No matter what.
That's the assertion. This perspective posits a God who is absolutely everything, and therefore, by divine nature, needs, wants, and demands absolutely nothing from creation.
If God is already complete.
Then qualities like jealousy, wrath, or vengeance, which usually arise from a sense of lack or threat, simply cannot exist within the divine. That's the logic.
That radically redefines the very nature of God, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how God interacts with us.
It absolutely does. It shifts the whole focus away from obedience and judgment towards an inherent, all-encompassing love.
That idea, a God who is absolutely everything, and therefore needs absolutely nothing, that is a truly radical departure from many traditional religious narratives, where God is often portrayed as demanding worship or specific behaviors.
It turns the usual hierarchy on its head.
So how did that reframe things like sin or repentance or even the purpose of our existence if divine love is just unconditional from the get-go?
Well, the text explicitly asks that kind of question. It says, why would I create you, give you the power to create, give you the freedom of choice to create what you wish to experience, then punish you forever for making the wrong choice?
A rhetorical question, basically.
Right. Implying the absurdity of it, it continues, I tell you this, I would not do such a thing, and in that truth lies your freedom from the tyranny of God.
Freedom from the tyranny of God. Strong words.
Very strong. It's not just asserting love, it's asserting a kind of divine logic. It aims to free the individual from the fear of an angry, vengeful God.
And emphasizing that union with God is
Complete. It always was, always is, and always will be. It's accessible at the drop of a hat. Through realization, not through striving or earning.
So you're not earning love, you're just realizing it's already there.
Exactly. This vision of God's love is described as eternal and unconditional for all those whose lives you touch. It fundamentally shifts responsibility away from a judgmental deity onto the individual's inherent connection and freedom. It's a profound declaration of spiritual liberty.
That's quite a paradigm shift.
It really is. And this profound sense of a non-punishing, all-encompassing divine love as described in Conversations with God, it isn't just some isolated modern idea.
You find echoes elsewhere.
Definitely. If we connect this to the broader tapestry of human spiritual experience, we find echoes, especially within mystical traditions. William James, for instance, in his seminal work, The Varieties of Religious Experience.
A classic.
Right. He delves into these deeply personal, often kind of ineffable encounters with the divine. And he notes that most religious men believe, or know, if they be mystical, that not only they themselves, but the whole universe of beings to whom the God is present are secure in his parental hands.
Secure in parental hands. That's a powerful image.
Isn't it? And he goes on to state, quite explicitly, there is a sense, a dimension they are sure, in which we are all saved, in spite of the gates of hell and all adverse terrestrial appearances.
Wow. All saved, despite appearances.
Yes. It underscores this fundamental, pervasive belief in universal security within the divine. A deep, abiding conviction that all existence is ultimately held within a benevolent, saving embrace, regardless of outward appearances or conventional notions of sin and punishment.
A vision of ultimate, inescapable belonging.
You could put it that way, yes.
That's a truly comforting and expansive thought that we are all saved in some fundamental sense. But if that's the case, what then is our role? Does James give any guidance on how we actually realize this salvation, or is it just a given?
That's a great question. He does highlight how, in opening ourselves to his influence, our deepest destiny is fulfilled.
Opening ourselves to his influence.
Suggesting that God isn't just a passive presence, but an active, causal agent and a medium of communion, actively guiding us towards becoming a better self.
So it resonates with the idea that our true purpose isn't about escaping damnation, but about actively aligning ourselves with this divine connection.
Exactly. It implies that true fulfillment comes not from rigid adherence to dogma or fear of judgment, but from actively engaging with this divine influence, allowing it to shape and elevate our personal growth and experience.
So it's a proactive personal journey towards our inherent divine potential rather than a frantic scramble to avoid punishment.
Precisely. It's about alignment, an internal shift, which leads nicely into Aldous Huxley.
Okay.
Drawing deeply from the ancient wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita in the perennial philosophy, Huxley speaks of finding home not in some external heaven, but right here in the blaze of my being.
The blaze of my being. So an internal path.
Intensely internal. He emphasizes that the kingdom of God is to be found exclusively within oneself.
That radically transforms the understanding of salvation then, doesn't it? If the divine isn't out there to be attained after death.
But rather an inner reality to be realized and integrated into daily life right now. For Huxley, even ordinary activities can be transformed, can become sacramental,
Oh, so?
leading to a profound, inclusive spiritual life that embraces the world rather than seeking to escape it. It really challenges us to ask, is salvation more about cultivating an inner state of consciousness than about external judgment or following specific rules?
An immanent spirituality.
God within us.
Exactly. The divine is omnipresent, particularly within us.
So if heaven is an inner state, what's the implication for how we actually live our lives day to day?
While Deepak Chopra's The Seven Spiritual Laws of Success certainly champions these inner states as foundational to our experience.
How does he suggest we cultivate them? He advocates for practices like daily silence, meditation, and importantly, non-judgment. He sees these as pathways to access what he calls pure consciousness.
And this pure consciousness has inherent qualities.
Yes, qualities like infinite creativity, freedom, and bliss. His teaching emphasizes a kind of universal law of giving and receiving.
Give joy to receive joy.
Essentially, yes. He states that the return is directly proportional to the giving when it is unconditional and from the heart, blessing others to be blessed. It paints this picture of a universe that mirrors our intentions and our inner state.
So it fosters happiness and abundance rather than imposing punishments for wrong choices.
Right. It's presented as a kind of self-regulating system driven by consciousness and intention, where positive internal states naturally lead to positive external experiences, invites us to become co-creators of our own reality.
Taking responsibility for our inner world.
And this idea of hell as an internal self-created state is echoed really powerfully by Don Miguel Ruiz in the Four Agreements and later the Fifth Agreement.
What's his take?
He connects these transformative ideas to what he calls a new dream, which he explicitly equates to Moses's promised land, Buddha's nirvana, and Jesus's heaven. These are all states of being, essentially.
So where does hell fit in?
For Ruiz, hell is not an external punishment imposed by some divine judge. It's the profound suffering caused by the misuse of our word against ourselves and against others.
Misuse of our word, like negative self-talk, gossip, judgment.
Exactly that kind of thing. He highlights how our identity is mixed with the dream of the planet, meaning we internalize and perpetuate collective suffering through the agreements we make and the stories we tell ourselves.
The internal parasite he talks about.
Yes, releasing that parasite of internal suffering, those self-limiting beliefs, those negative thought patterns, that's what truly allows us to experience love, according to Ruiz.
So again, hell is a deeply ingrained psychological state.
A pattern of negative thought and self-judgment keeping us from recognizing our inherent goodness and connection to love. An internal bondage, a self-imposed prison of perception rather than an external sentence.
That's a profound way to frame suffering internal, not external. And, it brings us kind of full circle to a core Christian teaching that beautifully supports this expansive, unconditional love.
Which one are you thinking of?
Bonhoeffer. In The Cost of Discipleship, he reminds us of that radical commandment from the Sermon on the Mount. Love your enemies and pray for them that persecute you.
That you may be sons of your Father which is in heaven.
Right. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust.
It's not just an ethical instruction, is it? It's deeply theological.
Exactly. This passage emphasizes God's impartial, universal care for all, regardless of their actions. It aligns powerfully with an unconditional view of divine love that really underpins the possibility of universal salvation.
It suggests a divine beneficence that extends to everyone without discrimination.
Directly challenging the idea of a God who picks and chooses based on a strict moral scorecard. It paints a picture of a love so vast it encompasses all, like rain falling on everyone, nurturing possibility everywhere.
Okay, so moving beyond that simple binary of, reward and punishment. Many spiritual traditions emphasize something different, a process of purification through suffering, as a path to deeper union with the divine.
Not punishment, but purification.
Right. St. John of the Cross, for instance, in his incredible mystical work, Dark Night of the Soul, describes this intense spiritual purgation.
What does he mean by that?
He explains it's not really about punishment for sins committed. It's a necessary process for the soul to move from what he calls an ignoble kind of love, maybe a self-centered, imperfect love, towards a higher degree of love for him, for God, ultimately leading to a transformative union of love.
And this involves darkness, the dark night.
Yes. Paradoxically, it involves God turning the soul's familiar light into darkness, leaving it in a state of profound dryness, insipidity, where traditional prayer or meditation just stops working, stops bringing comfort or clarity.
That sounds terrifying.
It's often described as such. It's an internal stripping away of attachments, of false comforts, designed not to inflict suffering for its own sake, but to refine the soul's capacity for pure, unadulterated divine love.
A dismantling of the ego's grip on spiritual experience.
That's a good way to put it. A profound, often bewildering dismantling.
What's truly profound, almost paradoxical though, is how St. John of the Cross describes this suffering. It's not just pain. He calls it a blinding of the spirit that in turn enlightens it again with a brighter and intenser light.
It's as if the soul has to lose its familiar ways of seeing, its usual spiritual comforts, to truly perceive something entirely new, something more profound.
Like needing darkness to see the stars.
Maybe. He describes the soul feeling keenly and sharply wounded in strong divine love, yet paradoxically experiencing a foretaste of God even within these dark confines.
So it doesn't sound like eternal punishment at all.
Not in the slightest. It sounds like a transformative, albeit agonizing, stage of spiritual evolution, a crucible where the very absence of light leads to greater illumination.
And the wound of love itself becomes a gateway.
To experiencing the divine in its purest form, yes. It reframes suffering not as an endpoint, but as a crucial, necessary means to a higher state of being, a process of divine alchemy.
A suffering for growth, not retribution.
Exactly. And St. Teresa of Avila, another great Carmelite mystic, delves into similar internal experiences in her masterpiece, Interior Castle.
What does she say about this kind of suffering or purgation?
Well, she describes purgatory, and she uses the term not primarily as a place of external fire, but as a state where souls, though they will not be with God yet, are not anxious about their own pain or glory.
So what are they anxious about?
She says they are consumed by their ingratitude to one to whom her debts were so great. It's a focus on the relationship, on the love itself.
An internal wound.
Yes, she describes it as a profound internal wound, not in any region where physical pain can be felt, but in the soul's most intimate depth. And she likens this feeling to the suffering of souls in purgatory.
And this suffering is intensely spiritual.
Absolutely, causing far greater pain, she notes, than any physical discomfort. It highlights this deep sense of longing, of remorse, an almost unbearable awareness of separation from the beloved.
An agony born from realizing how much love has been given, and maybe how little one has truly offered back.
That seems to be the essence of it, a purification of the will, an intense spiritual longing to be entirely consumed by divine love.
That deep spiritual ache does sound far more profound than just physical torment. What then is the ultimate purpose of this suffering if it's not meant to be punitive?
Well, the Philokalia, which is this foundational collection of texts from the Eastern Orthodox tradition, offers further insight.
What's it add?
It speaks of suffering for the sake of virtue, which is understood not as some external imposition, but as an active, willing participation in one's own spiritual refinement.
So embracing the difficulty for the sake of growth.
Precisely. And this suffering, the Philokalia states, cleanses him from all defilement. It raises the intellect to an angelic state, leading to dispassion and incorruptibility.
Now, dispassion here doesn't mean indifference, right?
No, absolutely not. It's a profound spiritual freedom from the tyranny of our passions, our desires, where we're no longer constantly swayed by every impulse or attachment.
And incorruptibility.
That refers to a restoration of our original, pure human nature, free from the decay and the distorting effects of sin or negative patterns. It's a process where a pure heart can, in some measure, see God himself.
Wow. The heart becoming a spiritual world of God, splendid and vast.
That's the language used. These texts powerfully reframe suffering as this crucible for divine transformation, a necessary fire that burns away impurities, not to punish, but to purify and prepare the soul for a deeper, more intimate union with the divine, a radical self-purification towards ultimate clarity.
These mystical traditions really do illuminate how suffering can be a path, not just a dead end or a punishment.
And Eckhart Tolle, bringing a more contemporary psychological perspective in A New Earth, offers ideas that resonate deeply with this theme of internal suffering.
How does he frame it?
He links much of our human suffering to the ego, which he defines essentially as the unobserved mind and unobserved emotions.
The patterns we're not aware of.
Exactly. And he introduces the powerful concept of the pain body.
A pain body?
Yeah, an accumulation of past emotional pain that kind of lives within us as an energy field and seeks to perpetuate itself by latching on to new experiences, feeding off negativity. He explains that dysfunctional thinking is what the body reacts to with negative emotion.
Can you give an example?
He illustrates it with the story of a woman whose pain body had become the filter through which she viewed her life situation, constantly feeding her pain with her own negative thoughts and interpretations.
So it suggests that much of what we might traditionally consider hell or prolonged suffering is actually a deeply unhappy self-inflicted state.
Originating and perpetuated within our own consciousness, a cycle of suffering fueled by unexamined thoughts and emotions. This psychological insight really aligns with the idea that our internal landscape profoundly dictates our experience of reality.
That's a powerful connection between our internal psychology and our experience of suffering. So what's the implication here? How do we break free from that self-perpetuating pain body?
Well, Ram Dass, in Be Here Now, reinforces this by stating quite directly that we are finished with human suffering only when you are living in the fourth chakra or higher.
Okay, the fourth chakra, the heart chakra, associated with love and compassion in Eastern traditions.
Exactly. Ram Dass emphasizes that reaching this state requires cultivating compassionate love for all beings, unconditionally.
How does he advise doing that?
He advises actively converting every relationship into one of compassion, consciously redefining negative situations through this lens. He calls this the divine work, making the profane sacred.
Making the profane sacred. I like that.
It echoes the idea that our internal state, particularly our capacity for unconditional love and compassion and how we choose to relate to the world, ultimately dictates our experience of suffering or bliss.
So it's a profound invitation to transform our reality by transforming our perception, cultivating an unwavering heart of compassion, actively changing our inner framework.
Precisely. And this journey of transformation and liberation is a core theme in so many traditions. Think about the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Okay, how does that fit in?
Well, it's essentially a guide for navigating the intermediate state between death and rebirth, the bardo. It offers a path to what it calls liberation from cyclic existence. Samsara, the endless rounds of birth, death, rebirth driven by karma and ignorance.
And how is liberation achieved?
Through spiritual practice and developing insight into the ultimate nature of reality, which is often termed emptiness.
Emptiness not meaning nothingness.
Correct. Not a void, but the profound understanding that all phenomena, everything we perceive, ourselves included, lack inherent independent existence. They're interdependent, impermanent, fluid.
And does it mention hell realms?
It does speak of a hell realm within its 5 or 6 realms of existence. But crucially, these realms are presented within a context of rebirth and transformation. They imply cycles of experience rather than eternal stasis.
So not a fixed punitive destination.
No, more like another potential state within the ongoing journey of consciousness, offering opportunities for learning and eventual liberation through recognizing the true nature of reality. It views these realms as transient, part of an evolutionary process, rather than a final, unchangeable judgment. Okay, shifting gears again, let's look through a more secular psychological lens. Brené Brown's extensive research, which she articulates so brilliantly in books like Daring Greatly and The Gifts of Imperfection.
Yes, her work on vulnerability and shame.
Exactly. It offers a powerful framework for understanding judgment and its consequences from a deeply human perspective. She notes, for example, that shame corrodes the part of us that believes we can change and do better.
So it's not just an unpleasant emotion, it's actively destructive.
Deeply destructive. Her research shows shame is highly correlated with violence, aggression, depression, addiction, eating disorders, and bullying. It's linked to so many negative outcomes.
How does she explain something like narcissism?
Interestingly, she sees narcissism not primarily as arrogance, but as A shame-based fear of being ordinary, a deep-seated fear of never feeling extraordinary enough to be noticed, to be lovable, to belong.
Wow, so it connects that internal experience of shame directly to these deeply destructive behaviors and states of being.
Absolutely. It suggests that many of the sins or wickedness discussed in traditional religious contexts might actually stem from this profound internal pain, this pervasive sense of unworthiness, a root cause for human suffering that's deeply psychological and emotional.
That's a truly compelling perspective. It really makes you pause and consider. Could that psychological, emotional experience of shame and worthlessness, this feeling of deserving punishment, could that actually be an earthly manifestation or maybe a precursor to the more traditional concepts of eternal judgment?
It certainly reframes the discussion if you look at it that way.
It does. Brown suggests, doesn't she, that humanizing problems, rather than just stigmatizing them with labels, can shed immense light on them.
Yes, understanding the root cause rather than just judging the symptom.
So if we understand shame as this deeply painful human experience that drives destructive behavior, then maybe addressing it with compassion and empathy for ourselves and others might be a far more effective path to healing and transformation.
Not just in this life, perhaps, but conceptually for whatever might come after.
It shifts the focus from external retribution to internal restoration, doesn't it? Inviting us to look for the roots of suffering in our own inner world and our shared human experience.
That's a vital connection to make, linking that internal psychology to these broader spiritual concepts. And building on this idea of internal drivers, we have Gary Zukov in The Seat of the Soul.
Okay, Zukov, what's his contribution here?
He introduces the concept of karma, but not as some arbitrary punishment from a divine hand,
How does he define it then?
as a direct, self-generated consequence of our intentions. He states that by consciously choosing intentions that come from love instead of intentions that come from fear, you create joyful karma instead of painful karma.
So the focus is on the intention behind the action.
Exactly. And this process, he explains, continues until your soul leaves the earth school, basically until we learn the lessons we need to learn, and we learn responsibility at your own pace.
Earth School. I like that framing.
It's a vision of a self-correcting universe where we're continuously given opportunities to learn and align our intentions with love. We're not victims of fate. We're active participants shaping our own spiritual trajectory through the quality of our inner motivations.
That's a deeply empowering thought, that our intentions are the real architects of our experience. What's truly fascinating is his idea that you create heaven on earth when you choose to respond to life's difficulties with intentions of love instead of intentions of fear.
It radically empowers the individual, doesn't it?
Totally. It places the locus of heaven or hell, not with some external punisher or a distant afterlife, but right here, right now, within the self's moment-by-moment choices and intentions.
Zukov also says psychology means soul knowledge. Understanding the soul's temperament, its deepest inclinations, is key to creating what he calls authentic power.
So our personal reality, our joy or suffering, is constantly being co-created by our inner state, by the quality of our consciousness moment by moment.
It invites us to take profound ownership of our experience, recognizing that our inner world isn't just a passive reflection, but a powerful engine driving our outer reality.
Okay, so we've looked inward quite a bit. What if we zoom out even further to a grand cosmic scale?
For that, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin in The Phenomenon of Man offers this sweeping evolutionary perspective that can profoundly inform our understanding of ultimate purpose.
An evolutionary perspective on consciousness.
Exactly. He asserts that evolution is an ascent towards consciousness. And he argues it culminates not just in individual enlightenment, but in what he calls a supreme consciousness, the omega point.
How does he see that happening?
He argues that thought itself can only extrapolate towards hyper-reflection or hyper-personalization, where individual centers of consciousness don't just disappear or merge into an undifferentiated blob.
But they converge.
Yes, they converge into a single center from the convergent beams of millions of elementary centers. It suggests a collective spiritual destiny for humanity, a grand unification of being.
Wow, where individual development contributes to a larger, shared, evolving consciousness.
It's a truly awe-inspiring vision of cosmic spiritual convergence.
That's a breathtaking vision. It really shifts our focus from purely individual fate to a kind of universal trajectory of consciousness. It hints, maybe, that our understanding of ultimate justice and divine love might also evolve.
As humanity ascends to higher states of awareness, as we participate in this grand, unfolding cosmic design that seems plausible within his framework.
If our consciousness is indeed evolving towards some grand unified state, then maybe our concepts of right and wrong, punishment and redemption might also transform, become more expansive, more inclusive, more interconnected than we currently imagine.
It's certainly a hopeful vision, isn't it? Not just for personal spiritual development, but for the future of collective spiritual understanding, suggesting a destiny of ultimate union and profound love for all. Hashtag tag outro.
So we've really taken quite a journey today, a deep dive into some of humanity's most profound questions about ultimate justice, divine love, and what truly lies beyond this life.
We certainly have, covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, we've journeyed from those stark warnings of torment found in some traditional texts all the way to the expansive, unconditional embrace of a non-punishing God found in others.
And we explored how spiritual purgation can be seen as this challenging yet necessary path towards profound union.
Right, and also how psychological suffering, the stuff Brené Brown or Eckhart Tolle talk about, can manifest as a kind of self-inflicted hell, stemming from our own internal patterns of thought and emotion.
What really stands out, I think, is not just the incredible diversity of answers humanity has proposed over the centuries.
But also maybe a unifying thread.
Yeah, exactly. A unifying thread of seeking meaning, purpose, and ultimately reconciliation in our existence. Whether it's the emphasis on our intentions creating our reality, like Zukov suggests,
Or that arduous but transformative journey through purification we see in the mystics.
or just the inherent, unceasing nature of divine love that encompasses all, as seen in sources like Conversations with God or echoed in James or Bonhoeffer.
These sources really challenge us, don't they, to look beyond simplistic interpretations.
They really do. They urge us to examine our own intentions, our capacity for compassion, both for ourselves and others, and maybe our willingness to truly grow and evolve.
Which brings us to a final thought, maybe a question for each of us to ponder. If, as William James suggests, we are all saved, in some fundamental sense, and if God's love truly is unconditional, as Conversations with God so powerfully posits, then perhaps the ultimate question isn't if we are loved or if we are saved.
But maybe.
Maybe the deeper question becomes, when will we fully realize and embrace that profound truth within ourselves? And how can we extend that realization to all beings? What will that knowing truly mean for how you live your life, right here, right now? How will it transform your understanding of justice, love, and your place in this vast universe?
That's definitely something to carry with you, a question that can keep unfolding.
Indeed. A thought to continue exploring long after this deep dive ends.